Welcome back to the Restoring Darkness podcast. On today's show, we are I don't have a last name here on the sheet. Tim, what's your last name?
Ryan, R-Y-A-N.
Okay, I'll just start it over. R-Y-A-N.
No problem.
I knew that, but just when I'm in the middle of the show, I'm like, I don't see the name here. What's his name? Okay, so I'll give it 5 seconds and start again, Scott. Yeah, okay. Welcome back to the Restoring Darkness podcast. Today, we are pleased to be joined by Tim Ryan. He is the Lighthouse Group Executive Director and the part of the principal lighting designers for Lighthouse Design Studio. Along with being a professional photographer, he takes pictures of all his work. He has been on this lighting ride for 27 years. It's a long time. And he started integrating lighting into his landscape designs from the very beginning. And then 5 years later, he moved into the outdoor lighting business, falling in love with the mood, magic, and totally new perspective that the illuminated garden space provides. He has been with Lighthouse since 2015 and is passionate about educating the next generation of outdoor lighting designers for the future of his art. Before we get into that interview with Tim, we've got to talk about Mark's organization, the Soft Lights organization. Softlights.org. It's spelled the way it sounds, Mark Baker. What are you guys up to these days anyway?
Oh my God, if I got into that, we'd use up the whole show.
Okay, so Mark does a lot of great work at softlights.org. He hates LEDs, so go on down there and check out his work, and you'll see all kinds of petitions and all this kind of stuff to help us improve the exterior lighting environment, and I support what Mark does very heavily. And you can check out restoringdarkness.com, the Lighting and Darkness Foundation, who pays for the production of this show, along with mitigating light trespass disputes between neighbors, and we're also creating education for frontline lighting practitioners. We're waiting for the board of directors to approve the money, so get ready, board. You better say yes, or I'm going to be really mad at you, but no. We have a great curriculum put together for all sorts of outdoor lighting practitioners that want to illuminate the exterior environment responsibly. Go to restoringdarkness.com if you want to support our work, or sign up for the Darkness News Update, a bi-weekly report produced by Scott Wachter, which gives you all the news related to light pollution in the English-speaking world, combined into one brief. That's right. Restoringdarkness.com. Tim Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much.
When did light pollution first become pertinent part of your practice?
You know, I think Scott from the very beginning, and
I'm Michael. Scott's the producer, but that's okay.
Michael, got it. Thank you, Michael.
I got your name wrong in the intro, but we're not cutting this out.
Hey, we're even.
That's right.
So, I don't think it was clearly something that I looked at in the very beginning. I think it started out for me more as an aesthetic choice when we're talking about lighting and lighting design. Things evolved a bit, obviously, when LEDs came onto the scene in a worse way, certainly. And that's when we started to see a rise in very poor design practices, a race essentially to see who could make the brightest LED, which for me, that's a good designer is not looking for the brightest LED. It's about nuances and balance and layering and texture. And usually a little bit of light goes a long ways when we're talking about the illuminated garden space as opposed to a commercial type of a setup. So for me, I would say probably within the past 5 to 6 years, starting to come into projects we're looking at where they had some dark sky regulations. So a lot in central Colorado, Arizona, some of these states that are more on the forefront of the dark sky type of, mindset of what they're thinking. And so being able to now understand like, oh, okay, so there's a problem. And you only have to look up and know that you can't see the sky of the cities, right? So that became something a little bit more sensitive. And so as we progress more, you start to take that into account. How can we do more downlighting? How can we do more lighting that's softer? How can we integrate better controls into our lighting designs as well, too? So for me, one of the big turning points, I'm also a board member for an organization. I'm going to give them a free plug here. It's the International Landscape Lighting Institute. It was Jan Moyer's was her original school for garden design. She'd been doing for close to 40 years. And going to that school, it will give a designer, a guy that's interested in the lighting, garden lighting side of things, landscape lighting, it'll give them a new perspective of how to illuminate properly. And one of the biggest takeaways I think I got years ago was walking away from that class going, I'm overlighting everything way too much.
Mm.
Whether it's up lighting, whether it's down lighting, anything overall, the human eye is so incredibly sensitive to light,
Mm.
and we deal in a space where we're talking about very low contrast levels as opposed to getting into city type situations where you're dealing with high output luminaires that you've got a really high difference between the darks and the shadows and in the lights itself. And so visually it's hard to see that sometimes, but in the garden space, when we bring the light levels down, we're reducing that contrast level. And so we're creating an environment that is much easier on the eyes. And so for me, starting to see some of these things coming into the forefront of the industry, dark sky sensitivities, seeing many more posts about it now. So it's something that has confronted, even the landscape lighting side of things. And so it just brings it more to the forefront, and us being more aware of what we're doing and how we're designing things.
So when you're talking about landscape lighting and light levels, I think, would you agree that any landscape lighting at 3 o'clock in the morning is too much landscape lighting?
Yeah. So I'll agree. Yeah. So lighting doesn't need to be on at 3 in the morning when nobody's there to see it, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, there are case studies and there are circumstances where around a house, around windows and doors, you could have a perimeter of soft light. It doesn't have to be at 100%. It could be at 50%, could be at 30%, where you could have a little bit of illumination around doors and windows and egress points just simply for a security and safety issue around walkways. But yes, yeah, uplighting and things like that. If nobody's there to see it, it's not a sustainable practice for energy-wise anyway, even though LEDs themselves don't use a lot of energy, particularly in a low energy lighting system, but still it's just the idea of why.
Yeah.
So I agree.
How do you incorporate controls? Before I turn it over to Mark, I got two more questions for Mark. How do you incorporate controls into your lighting designs? We've had talk on the show of having sensors inside the house that activate the outdoor lighting, the landscape lighting, and when nobody's moving inside the house, the landscape lighting is off. Have you incorporated this kind of progressive thinking about the use of landscape lighting and controls into your practice?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and something that's been on the forefront of my mind for a while. I will say that in the landscape lighting sector itself, we're probably 10 years behind the interior as far as controls and things like that go. I think it's just such a small segment of the market that you've got technology companies that probably don't want to invest as much into the low voltage side of things. But we are seeing some improvements, and ideally, what I would love to see is a manufacturer take up the mantle for this and start introducing controls that have proximity sensors and zone controls. We do see some zone controlling, but being able to have motion sensors where lights don't need to be on security zones, but I've always wanted, if somebody walks into a patio zone or a walkway zone where a light would kick on at 50% or 75% between the hours of midnight or 5 a.m., just being able to have a little bit smarter interaction with the outdoor lighting. It's starting to get that way, but we're still way behind. So
landscape lighting seems to be a lot of timer based, like timers are what's used.
A lot of it is. Yeah, a lot
but
of it
timers
is,
can do everything you need. I mean, if you set your timer like an astronomical timer on a landscape lighting system, with 3 hours after sunset, say, to go off after 3 hours, that's almost 99% of the control that you would need, other than maybe some occupancy sensing that you had brought up for wayfinding.
Well, that's true. The way we're having to do it now is they do have some new products on the market. There's zone controls. And so what we can actually do is we can actually zone out a single transformer power center. So if we run the circuits out to a particular zone, we can control the times when those are on and off. So you could have a security zone on with path lights that are all down lighting. You could have those on through the evening and then turn everything else off. So there's degrees of control that we can add, and we do encourage our clients to integrate these controls. And not everybody wants to do it because it's an additional cost and they just don't see the need. So it has to be, we can educate the client to a degree, but it really comes down, they're going to lead the charge, as far as integrating some of these things and investing in the cost and seeing the benefit and the need for it. So it's just education.
It's interesting. The lighting industry has, and Mark will agree with me on this, no problem. The lighting industry has a very big problem with awareness up and down the channel.
Yep.
Okay. So from the customer, like someone that's a landscape lighting customer, they're going to ask you, why would I turn the lights off at all? I don't want to turn them off at all. And I live in an area in near Toronto that's heavily landscape lighted. And I can guarantee you that all of those people want their landscape lighting on and their outdoor lighting on 24 all night long until the morning. And then in the lighting industry in general, whiter, brighter is better and safer, which is not true. But this is a an awareness issue across the chain, because as a lighting distributor and you're a lighting practitioner as well, a landscape lighting designer, you have to respond to the person that pays the bills. You can't get into a situation, your business is going to fail if you don't give the customers what they want. And so there's this problem we have between the lighting industry and the end users in terms of what's appropriate at night.
You're 100% correct. I think we're starting to take some ground on that approach, though. I think between podcasts and different community awareness organizations through social media, we're starting to see much more awareness of that particular issue. I know that personally, I'm seeing it across boards much more frequently. And when I'm in specific areas, I'm actually having far more customers ask me about that. Those issues like, hey, are these lights going to hurt my plants? Are they going to hurt, anything around my house? Do they just more interest in the impact, whether it be to human-centric impact or environmental impact that they're going to see with the lighting that we're applying. So there are more of those questions. So if we're using that as a barometer, then we definitely are seeing, that we're making some impact for sure.
Well, that's good to hear. I think that there's this awareness that the light can impact our nighttime environment. Tim, I had some technical questions. When I purchase products now for my house, maybe it's a dishwasher or a cordless drill or battery pack or something, they all seem to have an LED light on it now. And it's too intense, even the little wall sockets. It's just way too intense. So I've got all these little stickers everywhere.
I do the same thing.
You do the same thing. Oh my gosh.
I do the same thing.
So the industry seems to be moving more and more intense on the LEDs with no restrictions. And so I'm imagining the manufacturer that the designer just grabs the next batch, and whoever made the LEDs made them brighter. So every 2 years, let's say, they got more intense. How is that going to impact, or how do you deal with that in the garden lighting if it just keeps, you can't even buy the lower intensity ones that you want?
So that's a super, super valid point. And I made a video a while back. There is a big distinction between garden lighting and commercial or municipal type lighting as far as the impact of the light and the intensity of the light itself as well. To your point, when you're talking about going brighter and how bright can we get these luminaires, that was a trend I thought, after 2008, when we started seeing, sodium vapor and merc halide and some of these other light sources that were typical, incandescent type light sources, we started seeing LED. And what's happened is you have, municipalities or purchasing agents within companies, and they're going directly to manufacturers, and they're just, because these LEDs, they're just so available on the market that they can just bypass a designer, bypass a distributor. So they go as bright as they can. And so they're always asking, hey, can we make this brighter? Can we make it whiter? And they're asking about all the things they can do, never stopping to think, should they do that? And so what's happened is they should have consulted a designer, and they would have probably come across somebody and said, whoa. Do we really need this many lumens on your sidewalk? Do we really need this many lumens in the street all night long? So that has been the fundamental breakdown in the structure, where lighting designers have just been cut out of the process. And it's just become just a transaction between a purchasing agent and a manufacturer. Now, that's been on the commercial side. On the low voltage side, we are seeing a tremendous response from different manufacturers that are incredibly aware. We realize that obviously going forward, in many states are going to mandate color temperatures below 3K and nothing above. And so most everything that we deal with is in the 2200 to 3000K range anyway at the top end. So we don't ever really exceed that too much. And then most everything that we're dealing with luminaires, they're anywhere from 50 lumens max. We might get 500 lumens on a project. When we're doing garden lighting, we're dealing more with lower lumen type fixtures, but we're using more of them to create a softer effect rather than have a single fixture that just blows as much light as it can, which is not effective. So when we're talking about a 50 to 100 to 150 lumen fixture, when we talk about consider the inverse, square law of light, it just is not reaching high enough by the time that light beam gets up there that it's really making any effective difference. So manufacturers understand that, but they're still providing controls and dimming capabilities in warmer color temperatures, at least in our market. I don't see that in the municipal market at all.
That's not too high. 150 lumens isn't too bright, so it sounds pretty good for a garden lighting. Does your industry use the metric luminance? Do you ever use that in your design? How do
Sure.
you use this metric luminance?
So as far as, everything we do in garden lighting, it's all about reflective light. So you're talking about luminance, right? You're talking about what we're not seeing we're not seeing the light source itself. We're either grazing off of a wall or grazing off of a leaf. And so we're reflecting light off of objects. There's a saying in garden lighting, see the effect and not the source. And so we're incredibly careful about glare mitigation through the use of shields and honeycomb louvers and different types of optics that are going to really restrict the glare to what we're trying to do and shape the light as much as possible to be effective with it. So, everything that we're doing it's all about the reflective light that we're seeing. But as far as measuring light, it's more of for most people, you don't see too much measurement in the residential space where you're needing to go out and you need 3-foot candles out at a walkway like you would in a pedestrian area. We don't do that. It's all very aesthetic and what looks good to the eye of the person that's designing it.
Michael, I think this Tim Ryan needs to be hired by all the cities.
Well, I was just thinking that,
these garden light people out there.
Yeah,
telling them how to design aesthetically.
I couldn't. Yeah, I think that it's interesting that there's the idea of wayfinding has been lost to the lighting practice in a lot of different areas, and I find it interesting that you're creating a garden, so you're creating a beautiful space, right? You want to have a beautiful feeling of it, and so it has to be warm. The light has to be lower Kelvin temperature. Nobody wants 5,000 Kelvin garden lights.
No.
Right?
It doesn't look good.
But it's like this is obvious. It's so obvious. Humans don't like that color of light. It's not beautiful. It's ugly. It's stark. And according to the Soft Lights Foundation, it causes all manner of health problems for people.
I agree.
I don't know how and I think it's a tragedy that, we're well on our way to 5,000 K Earth,
Well, I hope not. And I think a lot of the reason people shift to colder color temperatures is they're trying to get more of a natural daylight, whether they're trying to fake CRI by pumping up some of the more blues and greens that they would see present out there. Honestly, if you're buying quality LEDs from a quality manufacturer, really what it comes down to, as long as we need to get away from this whole CRI metric because it's easy to cheat that system. When you're batch and binning your LEDs, we really need to start moving to the IES, the TM3015 scale, so that we can really look and see across 99 color scans. We can see the levels of what we're trying to do, and it's not necessarily about color temperature. It's about how true are the colors within the color temperature that we're using. Sure, 2700, 3000 are going to be a little render the warms of the reds and the oranges a little bit better than blues and greens. But if you're using a high quality luminaire with good chipsets in there, you're going to pull out those blues and greens relatively well. So it can be done in a warmer color set for sure.
You
just can't go cheap on the LEDs.
Well, you know what? I'm going to tell you something. So I've been in this business not quite as long as you, okay? But I've done 100, like we were talking before the show, hundreds of lighting episodes. And I deal with, customers on a regular basis with burnt out LED light fixtures.
Yeah.
And I'm here to say I have no idea what a quality LED is. And I'm the host of the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast, the host of the Restoring Darkness podcast. And I would say I am less certain about quality now than any other point in time in the lighting industry.
Yeah. Well, most people are not. Most people out there that are just throwing this stuff in the ground, they have no idea. Um,
Hmm.
they have no idea about volt amp ratings on luminaires for power and energy efficiency. They have no idea about how these things are batched and binned. When they're choosing their LEDs off the Planking curb source, how close they're getting to that to get true renderings. Every manufacturer, it's still the Wild West. I miss the days of halogen when we could specify a halogen bulb, and it didn't matter. Everybody had the same because it's a
Hmm.
black body tungsten curve that everybody follows. But in LED, it's still the Wild West, and people cheat the system. In 2700K from one manufacturer is not going to look the same from 2700K in another manufacturer. I can think of 3 different manufacturers now. If I can go out and drive in a neighborhood, and I can pick out, that's this system, that's that man. I'm not going to say the manufacturers, and that's that manufacturer because this one's a little bit purple, this one's a little bit green, this one's got a little bit different bluish hue to it, and I can pick them out. But even though they're advertised the same, and until we get better standards, like IES has done a good job at the TM30 being able to rate your LEDs and work into that scale. But until we can get more manufacturers complying and trying to get a set of standards for LED chipsets, so that we have more, more continuity and color fidelity across the board, that's what I'm hoping at some point we see.
I love Jason Livingston and Tony Esposito. Okay, I think they did a great job with TM30. I've interviewed Tony a couple times, worked with him in the association. That's the guy that came up with TM30, Mark. So, but I don't. I think it's a failure to launch. We
Could
don't.
be.
It's like it's just not taking off. The old useless metrics for incandescent lighting are perpetuating through the LED era. And this is Mark's bugbear because, and Mark, maybe you can comment on this before we throw it back over to Tim, that these metrics are almost meaningless in the LED era. They don't mean anything. Mark, what do you think?
Well, I'm not familiar with TM30, so I really not sure what to say, but
TM30 is a
yeah. So,
replacement for CRI.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, one comment I would say about nighttime is that seems like a weird metric to me. If it's nighttime, the color thing, that's not the natural system for our eyes. So if it was a natural system, we would be using our rod cells and there wouldn't be any color. That's the natural system.
Mm.
So trying to make the apple turn red by using an artificial light source at night outdoors seems counterintuitive to me, as to what you'd want. I think you'd want something. I personally remember when I was younger, this magical garden lighting thing, and those were incandescents back then. But so I know that feeling of this magical thing, and it's like little fairies and elves and stuff. I know you feel it. They're out
Sure.
there, right? So for some little short time while you're out there having a party or something and enjoying your garden, I think that's neat. But the idea of like, well, I want the colors to be like daytime. It's not daytime. I think it's nighttime. Tim, do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, and I don't think we're talking about, we talk about color for daytime. We're just talking about the accuracy of the
Yes.
color that's present in the objects. Like we when we illuminate a green tree, we want it to look green. We don't want it to look orange green. So we're just talking about true color fidelity in the objects that we're illuminating. Not necessarily that we're trying to make night look like day, which is the opposite of what we're trying to do, obviously.
Mm.
Um, and to your point, Michael, it's about coming out in these spaces, like you said, in creating an environment that is welcoming, it's inviting, it's relaxing, and that's part of what that whole space is all about. So
I
Tim, oh, okay. So this is sort of, it's the same topic side thing, but maybe you have some ideas here. So one of the things about this intensity thing is the holiday displays. This might impact, you might have to be involved in this, right? I
yeah,
mean, in the last couple of years, I cannot look at certain people's houses because those LEDs are too intense. Is this, I don't know, could you speak to that at all? This holiday lighting thing, that's just so intense.
yeah. So we do some holiday lighting
Mm.
as well, and depending on where you go and who does it, you know, everybody says they don't want their house decorated like Disneyland, but then Christmas comes around and looks like Disneyland.
mm.
So I can't necessarily say that, right? But yeah, they are intense on these LEDs. They are intense. It's a short season. Again, people leaving them on all night. Don't necessarily have to do that as well either. But I think one of the worst trends that I've seen recently is permanent holiday lighting. Are you guys familiar with that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's There's a couple different companies. I won't name names, but there's a handful of companies that encourage you to put them up on the roof lines and decorate them. You got all these colors all year long, and it is just a god awful trend that I hope dies very soon. But it's just a horrible source of light pollution. It doesn't do anything aesthetically to the properties, in my opinion. But it's there, and I think that answers probably some of your concerns about the holiday type colors being so intense.
One of the things that Scott Wachter complains about on the Darkness News Update on a regular basis is these light displays in support of various causes. Okay. So in Minnesota, you got purple. Well, what is it? Pride Month? Is it the Vikings? Like, people don't know what these colors mean anymore. They're just constantly putting out light at night in different colors because they think it's a great idea to support X, Y, or Z cause, right? And the fact is that it's, when it was just Christmas time and you're, put up some lights on Christmas, take them down at the Feast of the Epiphany, which is January 6th, folks. So they're supposed to be down, and there's nothing more annoying than someone that's got their Christmas lights on in March. Okay. Right. But it gets to a point though where when we're supporting every cause, are we supporting any cause? When we're lighting at night, like, what is the cost of this lighting versus its value to the viewers? Who's viewing it? Does anyone even want to view it? And then you got the whole, the ethics causes where not everybody agrees with the ethics of that movement. And so you're actually creating acrimony and people. I have this guy that on my country road has a giant sign beside his factory, and he puts political messages on it all the time. Okay, I happen to agree with his politics sometimes, but I really am not interested in hearing from him as I drive by his factory. And right. When I'm picking up my kid at a party at 2:00 in the morning, Justin Trudeau's a criminal or something like that. Like, it's like, buddy, nobody cares about your stupid sign. You know what I mean? And I think we need to pull back a little bit and I don't know if it's a social media thing, but everybody, and I'm a podcaster, so I'm probably super guilty of this, but we have to get to the point with our outdoor lighting exterior lighting, where we turn it off. Like, when is that point going to come? Where it's time for us that the message is sent. It's 10:30 now. Turn off the garden lights, the exterior lights, the signs, turn down the roadway lights. And we need to get to a point where we know that lighting is not good when it's not used and unnecessary. We need to get there, and I that's what this show is about. Can you have any thoughts before we close the show, Tim, on that?
I couldn't agree with you more. I'm 100% on board with that, and we're trying to do everything that we can in our industry, our little segment of it, to try to make homeowners aware of that very thing. There's a lot of things coming out. Whether the effect on insects, the effect on human biology, all the things around us. There's so many things that we don't know. We're living in an electric soup, and it's not just lights. It's the 5G. It's the current technical society that we're living in. It's the modern society, and our bodies are having to cope with all these frequencies, and we don't know the long-term effects. We look at these things as beautiful and functional, but we really don't know how they're going to affect long term. And so the easiest thing to do is just say, hey, nobody's looking at it, just shut it off. So that's what we try to tell our clients. And most of the time it's received very favorably. Occasionally, they may have a late night party that goes, but you can extend the controls for things like that. So my biggest plea would be for people that are in my sector of the industry to please come out with more advanced controls to allow us more individual control of luminaires and lights, and so that we can program them better function for the end user, and just to be a little bit more responsible with it.
I couldn't agree more. And I hope the lighting industry comes on board. I mean, we have real problems to solve in our countries, in our societies. And one of them is light pollution. This is a real distinct problem. And whenever you turn on the news, it's always about some other distraction. Nobody can get anything done. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? It's constantly, this guy can't do that because he might lose the election. It's like, who cares if you're not the president or the prime minister of Canada? Like, do you really think it's that important that you be the president? What if you did something right? Maybe you would get reelected, actually, if you did something good. You know what I'm saying? Instead of worrying about how, if I did this, I might not, what's the swing going to be? I'm so sick of being lied to by politicians. But anyway,
100%.
that's
Yep.
a whole different podcast we could start. Sick of being lied to by politicians.
Yeah.
Folks,
Phase two.
I want you to check out Tim's website, lighthouse-lights.com. There's a little plug for his company there. And then you can go to softlights.org. That's Mark's work, and he does great work. And you can check out restoringdarkness.com, and that's where you can find the Darkness News Update and this podcast. And you can even donate to our cause. You click the donate link if you want to help us out. And all of Tim Ryan's, well, he has LinkedIn. He doesn't have anything else on here, but his LinkedIn will be also put on the restoringdarkness.com website so you can connect with him. Thank you for listening, folks. Have a great rest of your day.